Okay, hi everyone. My name is Keith Hambrecht. I am the Restoration Program Manager for State Sovereign Lands. Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands manages state sovereign lands in Utah. Those include the beds of Utah Lake, Jordan River, and Great Salt Lake. Emily and Addie did a great job covering a lot of Utah Lake with regards to phragmites, but I'll talk a little bit more about the bigger picture with Great Salt Lake and Jordan River as well, and then add some additional information about Utah Lake. So there's a lot of talk about the fluctuations on Utah Lake. These photos are from Great Salt Lake. So here's Farmington Bay in 2003. This is after the floods of the 80s receded. And you can see very little vegetation. Basically, it's just a salt flat. And then with all these photos, you'll notice that peak in the background kind of orients you to the photo. So 2003, here's 2008. Just 5 years later, there's approximately 1,900 acres of phragmites. By 2010, 2,600 acres. And then here's 2017. So in a relatively short amount of time, all of Farmington Bay, this whole area of several thousand acres, filled in with phragmites. And here's what that invasion looks like. So a full-grown phragmites stand, 15 feet tall. And I show you this just to point out how quickly the invasion did happen and how significant the invasion was. And then also this provides context for Utah Lake, which has these fluctuating water levels. So on Great Salt Lake, the floods took place in the 80s, and that drawdown happened over 10 years. But this is happening on Utah Lake every year, or every couple of years, where we have these big fluctuations. So that really provides some context for the native plant revegetation that we're trying to do. This also illustrates how important it is that we control phragmites, just how significant its impact is. And so we've developed this treatment protocol, and the Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab, Dr. Kettenring's lab, where Emily is working, has provided a ton of research backing a lot of this. But basically, I think most people are familiar with this. We do a late season herbicide spray. The timing of that spray is very important. And then we follow up with mechanical removal. We repeat that until we have hopefully 10% or less phragmites cover, and then we can move into our phase 2, which is maintenance and restoration. And Addie was kind of touching on some of the initial efforts to do that, and then Emily touching on the research behind how we're going to implement this phase 2. So just touching on the other water bodies, since this is such a large effort. So on Great Salt Lake, the project area is about 180,000 acres. So it's about 20 times larger than Utah Lake. And it is collaboration across all of these different management entities: wildlife, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, Nature Conservancy, Fish and Wildlife Service, and then private entities as well. We also have just continued support from that Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab. So for the Jordan River, it's much more logistically challenging. I don't have too much time to talk about Jordan River today. I just have this one slide. We have 12 pilot project sites underway that cover about 140 acres. And you can see those project sites here on this map. They're spread up and down the valley. Really, what we're trying to do a couple things with these pilot projects. One, we're trying to figure out the challenging logistics of removing phragmites on the river. And these beautiful photos give you a pretty good idea of the challenge. We can't get the large equipment that we use in the wetlands into these areas. So for now, we have hand crews in there on canoes getting started. So we're trying to figure out those logistics, but then another really important part of the work on the Jordan River is just figuring out the collaboration across boundaries. So Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, we just manage the high water mark and below. And much of that phragmites is right on that boundary. And so each one of these project areas has an upstream partner, usually a city, and we're trying to build that restoration knowledge and capacity up and down the Jordan River. And then as far as Utah Lake, we've been treating the entire shoreline for 5 years now, since 2020. And it's around 12,000 acres total. And so now just moving into specifically Utah Lake, are these treatments working? Addie touched on this already, but this is kind of the information behind the scenes for how we get these numbers. So we keep track of all of the acres that are sprayed each year, which gives us an estimation of Phragmites cover. And actually, this year, we reached about 88% reduction. So our goal, as I mentioned before, with our treatment protocol is 10% Phragmites cover. So we're now at 12% Phragmites cover, and next year I suspect we'll have reached our goal, which is super exciting. And then just some additional context kind of related to Emily's project, also out of the Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab. They have actually an ongoing seed bank study for Phragmites viability, and this plot shows the germination percent of Phragmites seeds that were buried in the field that they're pulling out of the site and then growing out in the lab. And you can see at year 4 is where we get pretty close to 0% germination. And so after 5 years, only 1 to 8% germination of Phragmites, depending on the soil moisture conditions. So this is super encouraging. We know that we can get past the seed bank of Phragmites in a very short amount of time. And that was corroborated by Emily's results, where she saw no Phragmites in the seed bank in her plots. What's interesting is if you look at Phragmites cover on Utah Lake, so our percent reduction, right when we hit that 4-year mark, we saw a significant jump in reduction. And so that's also really encouraging. I think that we've definitely turned a corner with Phragmites. But I think one of the things I want to point out is just going back to the beginning with those water fluctuations. We're dealing with a shoreline that has constant disturbance, where the water's going to come up and it's going to kill off all plant communities. And then when it draws down, we're taking a look at what happens, that evolution over a couple of years if the lake is drawn down. And I think we have a lot to learn as far as how we react to that and what management approaches we'll take for that native plant revegetation. And then finally, I just have some pictures from around Utah Lake. In the past couple seasons, it's just been really, really exciting to see all the plants coming back. And then I'm kind of tired of talking about Phragmites removal, so I'm really, really excited to talk more about the native plant revegetation. And so what about those remaining acres? So there are 1,500 acres left of Phragmites. I know we have heard from some landowners, like, this effort's been going on for over 10 years and it hasn't made a difference. And generally, they're the people that have some of those remaining acres right in front of their house. And so there's just a couple of things to point out about those remaining acres. A lot of them are in areas that are just hard to reach. So we have these big tractors, and they're not able to go underneath trees or on steep slopes. So you'll see patches of Phragmites on the edge of a trail or around trees in these harder to get to places. Also, what's important to point out is often those are areas that are a little bit higher in elevation. That Phragmites is drier, and we know that our herbicide treatments are less effective in drier areas. So we have to do more years of herbicide treatment to actually kill a patch. And then another component is landowner permissions. The Utah Lake Authority has done a great job of getting landowner permission for us to treat Phragmites on private land. They're not able to get it every year on every property, so sometimes certain properties get missed where we don't have permission to do the treatments. But what's encouraging, even in light of all of this, because we've seen such a significant reduction in Phragmites, we actually now have the time and resources to get to these areas. And so we're sending in hand crews to do brush cutting. We're getting additional equipment to help us with these remaining small patches. And then some of the holdout landowners that haven't given permission are now actually giving permission because they can see the significant difference that these treatments are making. And then I did want to point out, so with our other collaborative efforts on Great Salt Lake and then on the Jordan River, Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has joint restoration coordinator positions. So on Great Salt Lake, our biggest partner is Division of Wildlife. So we have 2 restoration coordinators that work both for our division and the Division of Wildlife. On the Jordan River, we have a restoration coordinator that works with the Jordan River Commission, since they're our biggest partner there, and that's helping to facilitate collaborative efforts. And then this fall, we're really excited. Shortly, we'll be posting a position that will be a joint restoration coordinator position with our division and the Utah Lake Authority. And my hope is that they'll have additional time and capacity to get to areas like this, help with the planning, help with the partnership, a lot of the more time-consuming heavy lifting that happens to get to these remaining acres. So we're really excited about that position. Please spread the word. It'll be posted soon. And then what do we need going forward to keep this going? A lot of it is fairly simple. I mean, we need continued ongoing funding. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands now has ongoing funding to make sure that we get all the phragmites management to happen every single year that we know is important. So we do have that base level of funding to keep control going. Addie pointed to the grant request that they're going to put in, trying to find support for upstream phragmites control. So we know that phragmites spreads by seed. We need to control these upstream seed sources. In the Great Salt Lake watershed, phragmites has actually moved from the bottom of the watershed up because of seed spread. So now it's in the upper reaches of the watershed coming down. So now we have to get all of our partners on board to controlling upstream. And then revegetation is really important, as we've talked about, and there's so much to learn, I think, especially because of this constant fluctuation in water level. Like, how are we going to react to that? And then again, those photos in the beginning of the presentation just illustrate how quickly reinvasion could happen if we don't keep on it. And then in general, just continued support for all these efforts because it is really working. We have all the success. We just need to keep at it. And then as far as the collaborative efforts go, I mean, we have this amazing research partnership. I think there's additional research partnerships that we can establish. And then we now have collaborative efforts across all these different agencies and joint positions. So that's really exciting. But I think an area of improvement for additional collaboration is collaboration across disciplines, specifically for Utah Lake. We've got all these folks working on water quality, we've got all these folks working on fish problem, and then we have the plant people, and we're not collaborating with each other all that much. And my hope is with this joint restoration coordinator position, they can help kind of form that glue to get us all talking to each other, share ideas, and work together. That's all I have.